Hi there, this small talk is going to give you an overview of a project that I was involved in a few years ago, and it will give you an example of an application of design thinking. So for some background and context, we were tasked with developing a technology-based service to help older and vulnerable people who may have support needs but do not qualify for any state-funded health or social care support. And it's important to note here that we had the constraint, due to where the funding came from, that it had to be a technology-based service. To recap the stages of design thinking, as part of the project, we want to empathise, to understand the needs of the people we are trying to help and support. We want to define the problem. We want to ideate solutions with our co-creators, and then we want to prototype and test those solutions to see how fit for purpose they are. How did the wider co-creator group empathise with the people that we were aiming to support? We developed personas with our co-creators who were older, vulnerable people, disabled people, friends, family, carers, charity workers, designers, researchers, and people from technology companies. And these are the personas that they came up with. They were given the task of coming up with a family friend unit where there might be a concern for an older or vulnerable individual and their ability to live independently at home. And one of our groups came up with Ada, a 75-year-old widow who lives alone in a cottage in a small village. She has her friend Alison, who lives nearby and is able to help out occasionally, but she has her daughter Marie, who lives 50 miles away, who sometimes has concerns for her mum's ability to live at home on her own. And after talking to older people and their carers, we found that existing technology products tend to place their emphasis on when things go wrong, rather than on reassurances that things are going okay. So Ada might be okay living at home on her own, but if she had existing technology services, for example pendant alarms, which are often provided by social services departments in the UK, Marie would only receive alerts and messages when something went wrong, for example, if Ada had a fall. And from this, we defined the problem as needing to develop a service to provide reassurance to families of those vulnerable people living alone, a service that will let people know when things are going okay, as well as when things go wrong. But how do we define okay? Our co-creation workshops suggested that getting up and undertaking one's daytime routine would suggest that somebody is okay. As I mentioned, we also had some constraints in the project dictated by the funder that we needed to base the service around technology, and preferably existing technology, so we could quite quickly prototype a scalable service for testing. One technology that was available to us was electrical device monitoring, so a device that would plug into a socket and send a signal if that particular device had been switched on or off. Following this, we used a collage and mapping activity to explore the daily routines of older and vulnerable people and what might indicate that someone might be up and about and doing okay. In particular, we were interested to know if the use of any electrical devices would indicate being okay. So you can see on this collage here, we've got pictures of different electrical devices that are used during people's morning, afternoon and evening routines. And given that this project was conducted in England, we found that a very common indicator of being okay was getting up in the morning and switching on the kettle to make a cup of tea. Our next stage was to start to ideate what the service might look and feel like. So we used sketching activities to explore possible brands and how the service might be marketed and how the service might look. And we asked people to sketch a customer journey, thinking about Ada and her friend and her daughter and what their customer journey would look like as they progressed throughout the service. We also used a bespoke What's in the Box activity where we literally gave people blank boxes and asked them to place in the box the types of technologies that they would like to see within a reassurance service, thinking about what technologies might or might not be acceptable to put in people's homes. For example, the electrical device usage sensor that I mentioned earlier, people were quite comfortable with having one of those in their home, so that went into a lot of people's boxes. However, camera technologies, people were much more uncomfortable with that. They felt it might be intrusive, so that did not feature in people's boxes. And here are the results of our customer journey sketching task. I'll very briefly talk you through this, but the slides are online if you want more detail. With regards to the technology side of the service, our co-creators wanted the service to send messages letting their friends and family know that everything is okay. And if they had taken part in the daily routines that would trigger the relevant devices within their home, for example, setting their heating at a warm enough temperature, making a cup of tea in the morning, or opening a cupboard door and triggering a door sensor, all of that information within the service would then trigger a text message to friends and family to say that everything is okay. And conversely, if those activities didn't happen, then their friends and family might get a text message to say that maybe someone had been inactive and they might need to be checked up on. So once we had this information, we were ready to move to a prototyping stage, and we were able to prototype the service repurposing existing assistive technologies, which included a 3G enabled base unit that enabled the system to work. We had a temperature sensor, door sensors which could be put on a cereal cupboard door or a fridge door, for example, and sensors that picked up on the use of electrical devices. And as I mentioned before, this could be plugged into a kettle, a TV or a radio, depending on a person's particular daily routine. So the service would then use information from these devices to send alerts to chosen friends and family. If the devices had picked up that daily routines were being carried out, then the person's contacts would receive an alert saying, your friend is active. If by a certain time, which could be personalised for each household, the devices hadn't triggered, then friends and family would get an alert to say, your friend is inactive. However, prior to this alert being sent out and worrying people, the base unit would sound an alert within the older person's home to allow them to cancel the inactive alert being sent out. And this aspect of being able to control alerts very much arose from our co-creation workshops, and it was a feature that was very important to them. For example, they felt that if they were going out for breakfast, then they wouldn't have breakfast at home, so they wouldn't activate the necessary devices to prevent the inactive alert from being sent out. They might also leave their heating switched off to save energy whilst not at home. And without this control feature, this activity would send an inactive alert and unnecessarily worry friends and family. So we tested this service with 12 families across the West Midlands, and we had 12 homes, 14 main users because 2 of the homes had couples as the main users, and between them we had 19 carers and responders. And 3 of our families had a main user with a diagnosis of dementia. It was very early stage dementia, so they were still able to live at home safely and understand the service and how it worked. And we asked them to trial the service for 12 weeks, and we interviewed them at 6 weeks and at the end of the trial, and asked them to keep a diary during this time so they could record their thoughts and experiences. And the results we got were overwhelmingly positive. We found that the service promoted greater understanding, awareness and reassurance between the older people and vulnerable people and their friends and family who were receiving these alerts. People really liked the focus on the positive well-being and the activity messages rather than only being alerted if something had gone wrong. And every single family in the trial wanted to continue to use the equipment, and the technology company who donated the equipment for the trial very kindly allowed them to keep using the equipment after the trial ended. But we did find that there were some issues around installation and setup and the personalised messaging. For example, people didn't think it was personalised enough. Although they liked that they could choose which members of their friends and family the alerts went to, they didn't like that the alert just said, your friend is inactive. They wanted to have names and a more personal message sent to people. And there were a few bugs in the system with the technology. So, for example, one home had problems with a temperature sensor that kept sending out inactive cold home alerts. So we were able to take that on board and feed it back to the technology company to put together a second iteration of the technology for future testing. But generally, the service overall was very well received by all 12 families who tested it for us, and the project is an example of how design thinking, co-creation and rapid prototyping can appropriately and inclusively involve users and key stakeholders in the product design process, while stimulating the development of creative and innovative ideas grounded in user need to support well-being. Absolutely, there were so many ideas that came out of our co-creation workshop that we as researchers and designers would not have anticipated or thought of ourselves, so their inclusion in the project was invaluable. So that's the end of this overview. Here are the references that have been used for this talk. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.